what's it called? Systems Engineering Institute and DoD came up with this idea of a capability maturity model. And basically what they said was, this was their way of getting out of the let's stop paying lip service to quality. So they came up with 5 levels, and I'm not going to get the words right, but basically down here you had chaos. And up here you were totally optimized. And what this means is, in chaos, it's a miracle anything gets done. Because everybody's sort of on their own, has their own way of doing things. You know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Everything's very haphazard. That's chaos. When you start to get to level 2, you have processes in place. So we have written a process to peer review a deliverable. Or we have written a process to review a task order. There are processes in place. So we're better than chaos, but we're still producing inadequate results. By the time you get to 3, you're at repeatable processes. So not only do we have processes, but guess what? Lo and behold, we're all using the same processes. It's a good thing. And by the time you get to 4, you've started collecting metrics. So I want to see how effective our task order process is, how long does it take us to process the average task order, how many times are there errors, what can we do to fix those, just collecting all this data. And by the time you get to level 5, you're fixing those errors so that you're running a tightly run ship. And the government knows that they can't expect everybody to be here because, quite frankly, being here is very expensive. And the analogy that SEI uses is if you're the mother of a baby and there's a fire in your house, what do? Grab the baby and run, right? But when you get to having 90 babies in a daycare center and 40 adults, you need to have a process in place. So there you need to be up here. But if you're a mother of 1, you could just be here and just run out. So that's what a capability maturity model is. So how does the government use this to test quality? So what they do is they say, the example I'm going to talk about is systems engineering. But what they did was they came up with a list of 90 questions, so an assessment. And they were pretty much yes or no questions. Do you have a quality control plan? Do you conduct peer reviews? Do you have a configuration management plan? Do you, right? All these questions. And you could self-assess yourself. So you could answer all these questions and say, based on the fact that I have, out of these 90 questions, I have 30 questions yes, I'm a chaos. I'm at level 1. Or I have 50 questions marked yes, I'm at level 3. So I do that self-assessment. Now the government comes out with an RFP, and they say, yo, contractors, if you want to bid on this contract, you have to be at a level 3. And I can say, how cool is that? I just assess myself, I'm at a level 3. Yay. So I submit my proposal. Then the government comes back and I make the competitive range, and they come back and they say, okay, now we're going to conduct an audit of you. So they'll come in and they'll basically verify everything that I said in my self-assessment. So, Marianne, you said you had a configuration management plan. Let me see it. You said you conducted peer reviews. What was your last deliverable? Oh, you sent something into NIH. Okay, who were the people that reviewed it? Let me talk to them for a minute and make sure that they reviewed. Let me see their comments. And they basically go through that self-assessment in detail to make sure you've done everything you said you're doing. Now, at the end of that audit, it could come out and say, yay, you're right on. You're a 3. That's exactly where you are. You can still be considered for an award. Or they can say, are you kidding me? You're not a level 3. You're a level 2 at best. And so now I'm kicked out of the competitive range and I can't go after it. So this model, as I mentioned, was developed by SEI, which was part of the Carnegie Mellon Institute in Pennsylvania, and it was part of DoD. This model has been so successful that it has now been cloned for use in other areas. So for example, I was on the development team to take this to the outsourcing world. So we have a capability maturity model for outsourcing. There's one for training. There's one for acquisition. All these different capability maturity models. So if you see anything about capability maturity models, what you want to do is get the actual copy of the model and then an actual copy of the questionnaire and answer those questions, figure out where you are. And then basically, it gives you a roadmap for how to improve. So if it says, do you have a peer review process, and I answer no, and that's what's keeping me at this level, I need to get a peer review process, and then I can move up to this level. So it's things like that. So the government's paying a lot more attention to quality now, as you'll see. So when you're doing a performance work statement type of contract, they will actually ask you to provide them a quality assurance surveillance plan. So the easiest example is sometimes when you go into restrooms, you see a piece of paper that says the date, the time, and a sign-off. Meaning what? What is that representing?
But there's a schedule that's set, the process, and that's just where to verify that it's being done.
Right. So in that case, that was a statement of, that was a performance work statement type of requirement. And one of the proposal requirements was for the contractor to say, please develop, for the government to say to the contractor, develop a QASP. And the contractor came back and said, we will put a login sheet in every restroom we're responsible for. And every time the person goes in to clean it, they will sign and date it so that the government contracting officer representative can walk into a restroom at any time and see if it's been cleaned in the correct amount of time because you can see the signature and date. So what happens in a QASP situation is that you submit how you want to be evaluated during contract award. So you make it so it's unencumbersome for you, but that the government still gets what they need. And then the government sees your QASP, they evaluate it as part of your proposal, and tell you, yes, this works, or no, it won't work, or we need to add this, or we need to subtract this, whatever their issue is. And then whatever the final one is that you both agree on, that's what you work on through it. That's what you use throughout. So my point in telling you this is that quality is no longer lip service. This has teeth behind it. Because if you don't meet your QASP requirements once you agree to them with the government can hit you with liquidated damages. They can reduce money from your invoice because you weren't compliant. And if you continue to not meet this, they can terminate you for default. So there's much more emphasis on quality. Any questions about quality?
No, I just want to make a statement, and if I can just get an amen from Sam, that if this seems a little overwhelming, just remember, you've got JEDge going to do that growth accelerator, and they go through this process, so you don't have to do it by yourself. And it's very similar. I mean, you all even call it the capability maturity model.
Yes.
So just know that, again, what you need to do, it fits, and they're going to be able to help walk you through that whole process. The benefit if you decide to go forward with the Growth Accelerator Phase 1.
How many people signed up last night?
Well, I just sent the application link
Yeah.
just a little while ago, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got a break. Should we take a break now so you get off of and please understand, my goal in this class is not to overwhelm you, but I would much rather talk about the stuff that you could encounter, so then you can always go back to the tape and re-listen to it. It may not ever apply to you, and I'm sorry that you're listening to it and you're getting information that you don't need, but quite honestly, it's giving you a context and perspective. So that's why I'm teaching this class the way I am. Okay.
Absolutely, and I in no way want to. I'm just saying that if they are feeling that,
Yeah.
but no, I've got to know everything.
Yeah. All right, so we talked about statements of work. They're used for more traditional procurements. They specify the processes and the methods that the contractor needs to use. They describe what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. Very detailed prescription, as I mentioned, the commandments. Typically, because they're giving us so much detail, they're pretty much telling you what they want as their solution. And all you do is give it to them exactly how they want it. When you have a statement of work format, they're supposed to give you a very clear, or a background of the problem. So think about background of a problem. You know, if I've been complaining in my organization for years that I hate the way this thing is done, I might try to delineate every single point to you and sort of overwhelm you, right? And what we emphasize with contracting officers is just tell the contractors what they need to know about this procurement. You know, keep it so that they get a perspective, but that you're not bringing up, 30 years of history and explaining it to them. The objective, a very succinct statement of the purpose of the desired end product. So what is it that they're trying to accomplish? You know yourselves, you were taught, be able to describe your idea in a 30-second elevator speech, right? If an executive gets on the floor with you, or an investor gets on the floor with you, or a customer gets on the elevator with you at the ground floor, by the time they're in the end of the elevator ride in 30 seconds, they should have a very clear idea of what you do. If you can't define it in 30 seconds, you need to work on it to be able to define. You're too scattered. You can't do targeted selling if you don't know what you're doing. So it's forcing us to figure out what we do in 30 seconds or less. Same thing here, succinct statement about the objective. The scope is supposed to provide a broad, non-technical sketch of the nature of what's required by the solicitation. And then the task requirements are the detailed work that needs to be performed during the period of performance. So the government will say, this contract is going to start here and it's going to end here. During that time, this, and this have to be accomplished. Here's the level of effort that has to be provided, and how much travel is anticipated so that you can price it, and what any kind of reporting requirements are going to be. And then it may also state any sort of final products or deliverables that have to be done by the end of each phase. So established reports, those kind of things. And in the statement of work, it doesn't provide any measurable performance standards. It's strictly this kind of stuff. So a lot of what you'll still see out there are statements of work. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break because the next topic is heavy duty. It's all contract stuff. So let's breathe first and then we'll come back in.
This kind of describes it, this is kind of outline, and then how to register
This thing stopped here.